Cop mocks elderly black woman on the street. Regrets everything when her son shows up in uniform. What if I told you a 67-year-old widow was pulled over? Not for speeding, not for breaking any laws, but simply for driving while black. What if I told you the officer didn't see a human being behind the wheel, just a profile, a target, a threat? And what if I told you the woman he humiliated was the mother of the most powerful legal official in the city? This isn't fiction. This is what happens when racism meets the wrong woman and when silence becomes a revolution. Her name, Camilla Monroe. And after tonight, you'll never forget it. She was a 67-year-old widow just driving home after a scholarship gala until the flashing lights pulled her into a moment that would shake a city. What Officer Wade Kessler didn't know, he wasn't just stopping a black woman. He was stopping the mother of the state attorney and unintentionally igniting a reckoning that she didn't need to shout to lead. If you believe dignity doesn't need a title, hit subscribe. This is Camilla Monroe's story, and you need to hear it. It was just after 9:45 p.m. when the streetlights began casting long golden shadows across the tree-lined boulevards of Hyde Park, one of Chicago's oldest and most storied neighborhoods. The city was winding down, the faint hum of jazz from a nearby bistro mixed with the hush of Lake Michigan in the distance. The night carried a stillness, the kind that feels earned after a long day. Camilla Monroe, 67, sat behind the wheel of a dark blue 2021 Lincoln Continental. She wasn't in a rush, not anymore. Her hands, graceful, worn with decades of care and labor, rested gently on the wheel. Her silver curls tucked beneath a soft wool beret. Her navy trench coat buttoned up despite the summer warmth. On the passenger seat sat a folded program from the gala she had just left, an event in honor of her late husband, Charles Monroe, once a beloved professor and civil rights icon at the University of Chicago. To most, she was just another older black woman driving home late. But those who truly knew her knew better. She was a retired educator, a widow, a pillar of the community, and most notably, the mother of Everett Monroe, the youngest and most powerful state attorney Chicago had ever seen. But tonight, Camilla wasn't thinking about power titles or legacies. Her thoughts were softer memories of Charles humming Nina Simone tunes as they drove these same streets. The gala had stirred up ghosts, and she missed him, quietly, deeply. As she turned onto South Dorchester Avenue, she noticed headlights behind her. A black and white patrol SUV, unmarked except for the faint CPD badge. At first, she thought nothing of it. Police often patrolled Hyde Park. But when the cruiser mirrored every turn, her chest tightened slightly. She exhaled. "Don't make it a thing," she whispered. "Just keep driving." She turned. The SUV followed. Again, still behind her. Her fingers gripped the steering wheel, not out of fear but frustration. Not again. Not after everything. She had marched in protests. She had stood between batons and megaphones. But here she was still, a profile, a silhouette, then flashing lights. A short, sharp siren chirped. Camilla pulled over slowly, deliberately. Under a flickering lamppost, she parked, shifted to neutral, turned on the interior light, placed both hands on the wheel. She waited. The officer approached. White, buzz-cut, mid-30s, square jaw, cold eyes, his name tag, Officer Kessler. No greeting. No explanation. "License and registration?" he barked. Camilla nodded once. Calm, clear. "They're right there, officer." She gestured her leather pouch on the dashboard. Everything visible, nothing hidden. Kessler didn't reach. Instead, his flashlight scanned her purse, her jewelry, her face. "Where you headed this late?" he demanded. "Just left an event. Going home." "I live nearby." "What kind of event?" "A gala. For scholarships. I'm on the board." Kessler raised a brow. "Out-of-state plates." "You visiting?" Camilla's voice stayed steady. "Bought the car in Michigan last month. My son helped me pick it out. He's a prosecutor. a flicker in Kessler's expression. Skepticism, annoyance. "I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle," he said, hand drifting toward his belt. Camilla blinked. "On what grounds your tags don't match your license address? Could be registration fraud." "Step out, ma'am." It wasn't a suggestion. Camilla sat taller in her seat. "I'm not refusing, officer," she said slowly. "I'd simply like to understand why this is escalating. I haven't been informed of any violation." "That's obstruction," he snapped. Across the street, a man walking his dog paused. A nearby rideshare driver, Malik Townsend, reached for his phone. Somewhere someone started recording. Camilla exhaled. She knew the playbook. She'd seen it written in blood. "I'm stepping out," she said, voice even. As she opened the door, the night air struck her skin crisp and heavy with tension. One hand on the door, the other visible. She stood beneath the light, unshaken, unbowed. And then she waited. Officer Wade Kessler moved closer, eyes narrowed as if still debating whether this woman was trouble or merely an inconvenience. That's when his radio crackled to life. A voice came through calm clipped. "Unit 12, confirmed name of suspect. Dispatch running cross-check now. Over." Kessler pressed the mic. "Monroe, Camilla, CAM." The voice on the other end cut in sharply. "Hold position. Repeat hold." A pause. Then firm, clear with a tone that sliced through the silence like glass. "That's Camilla Monroe. Confirmed. Do not detain." Kessler froze. "And then she's the state attorney's mother." "Repeat, this is the mother of State Attorney Everett Monroe." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. The lamplight flickered again. But now it felt different, like the entire block was holding its breath. Camilla didn't smirk. She didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice or lower her gaze. Instead, she looked Officer Kessler straight in the eyes and said, with the calm only decades of being underestimated can shape, "Now may I go home, officer?" The air shifted. The ground beneath them didn't move, but the balance of power did. And for the first time that night, Kessler didn't look like an officer in control. He looked like a man who had just been caught standing on the wrong side of history. The night in Hyde Park remained cool quiet. But on South Dorchester Avenue, the atmosphere was electric. Something had cracked open. Officer Kessler stood stiff, hand hovering near his radio, his face flushed with the kind of shame that crawls slow and deep. He had realized far too late who she was. And Camilla Monroe hadn't budged. She stood there outside her car, not to prove anything, not to plead, but to demonstrate something deeper. That presence is power. And sometimes silence is the loudest protest. Kessler cleared his throat, voice brittle. "Ma'am, you're free to go." But Camilla didn't reach for her door handle just yet. She raised an eyebrow, cool, composed. No citation. No explanation for the stop. He avoided her eyes. "Your vehicle matched a description from a B&E earlier," he mumbled. "She didn't buy it. Everyone could see that." "Is that what you're going with?" she asked, voice razor sharp in its restraint. No answer. Just a cowardly silence. Across the street, Malik Townsend, still filming, kept his camera steady. His TikTok already had a title, "Cop Pulls Over State Attorney's Mom." What happens next? Watch this. And that was just the beginning. Across town, Everett Monroe, the youngest ever elected state attorney of Chicago, was still in his office at City Hall. The skyline behind him gleamed through a towering window. He was no stranger to late nights. Reform didn't run on business hours. Stacks of case files lined his desk. Police union appeals, oversight board reports, drafts for legislation. He was deep in a memo when his phone lit up. Unknown caller ID. Dispatch. CPD internal. He answered on the second ring. "Monroe, this is Watch Commander Terrence Blake at the 3rd District. We've had a situation involving a Ms. Camilla Monroe, your mother." Everett sat upright, voice immediately sharp. "What happened?" "There was a traffic stop. Officer initiated a pullover. It was mishandled. She wasn't harmed, but there was escalation. She wasn't cited. The officer didn't recognize her at the time. Everett exhaled, not out of relief, but with the slow, measured fury only a son can know when his mother is disrespected. "Send me the dash cam and body cam footage. Now, every angle. I want it before sunrise." "Yes, sir. Understood." He hung up, and then he just stared at the screen for a long moment, not because he was surprised, but because he was angry in a way that simmered rather than screamed. This wasn't just about Camilla anymore. It was about every mother who didn't have a son in office, every elder who couldn't name-drop protection, every citizen pulled over because of the color of their skin, not the content of their record. He opened a new file. Subject line Protocol Breach Review. Priority 1 memo. Tonight, my mother was treated like a suspect 2 blocks from her own home. If this can happen to her, it can happen to anyone. Let's not wait for outrage. Let's act now. He hit send. Back on Dorchester Avenue, Camilla finally stepped back into her car. Kessler stood near the curb, looking ghost-like in the glow of his cruiser's lights. Camilla didn't thank him. Why would she? She fastened her seatbelt, adjusted her mirror, restarted the engine. As she pulled away from the flashing red and blue, the only thing in her ears was Charles Monroe's voice, soft, steady, echoing from memory. Dignity isn't a gift. It's a stance. And she carried that stance all the way home. By the time Camilla Monroe pulled into her driveway, the second wave had already begun online. Hashtags like Da Mama Monroe and Da Hyde Park Stop were trending across Twitter, TikTok, Facebook. The original video from Malik Townsend, the rideshare driver, had already hit 18,000 views and climbing. Comments poured in like a flood. "She's got more class in her silence than that officer has in his entire career. How many mothers don't get to drive away? Why does it always take power to prove worth?" People weren't just watching. They were waking up. That same night, Officer Wade Kessler sat alone in his patrol car parked in the shadow of a grocery store. His laptop glowed coldly in the dark. He didn't touch it. His hand stayed on the wheel. The call from dispatch hadn't just shocked him, it had humiliated him. State attorney's mother. He had made a career following procedure. But deep down, he knew tonight wasn't about protocol. It was about profile. He hadn't followed the law, he had followed his bias, and now the fallout was coming. By morning, Camilla's phone had 27 missed calls, not just from friends or family, but from journalists, activists, pastors, former students, strangers. At sunrise, her doorbell rang. It was Everett Monroe. She opened the door still in her robe, a pot of tea steeping quietly behind her on the kitchen counter. Before she could speak, her son stepped forward and wrapped her in a hug, so tight she had to gently pat his back to loosen it. "I'm fine," she said softly, her voice warm but strong. Everett stepped back, his eyes glossy. "You shouldn't have to be fine." She gave him a knowing look, one worn only by women who've endured too much to waste breath on rage. "Don't fight a fire with fury, baby," she whispered. "Fight it with truth." Everett nodded slowly. "Then let's show them the truth." They sat at the kitchen table as the city began to stir outside. Everett laid out the beginnings of a strategy, not just for response, but for revolution. He wasn't going to release a polite statement. He wasn't going to hold a closed-door meeting. He was going to launch a full citywide review focusing on every discretionary police stop in majority black neighborhoods over the past 5 years. And he would call a press conference. Not tomorrow. Today. This time the system would have to listen, because this time it wasn't just about bias, or posture, or protocol. It was about power, and who finally held it. At exactly 9:00 a.m., Chicago awoke to a headline none of its residents expected. State attorney's mother pulled over without cause in Hyde Park CPD under fire. Below the headline, a freeze-frame image, Camilla Monroe standing beside her silver Lincoln. expression unbothered but commanding. It wasn't just a photo. It was a spark, the kind of image that ignites action, not just curiosity. But inside her modest South Side home, Camilla's morning was, as it always had been, calm, deliberate, steeped in rhythm. She brewed her tea-green jasmine, laid out the newspaper, opened the kitchen window to let in the October air. She didn't rush, not even now when the city was on fire in her name. Because Camilla understood something most people missed during chaos. Nothing powerful happens in panic. Meanwhile, on the 19th floor of City Hall, Everett Monroe sat in a glass conference room surrounded by legal advisors, policy directors, and a swarm of communication aides buzzing like bees around a storm. "We're getting dozens of calls," said his chief of staff. "Civil rights orgs want statements. News anchors want interviews. The governor's office wants to know if we're escalating." Everett didn't flinch. "We're not escalating," he said coolly. "We're preparing," because he understood the reckoning wasn't coming. It was already here. By noon, protests had started not in the usual hotspots downtown, but right in Hyde Park. At the exact corner where Camilla had been pulled over, people gathered, candles in hand, signs raised high. Dignity shouldn't require recognition. Respect is a right, not a privilege. Justice for every mother, not just the mayor's. But there were no chants, no shouting, no marches. Just silence. The kind of silence that speaks louder than sound ever could. A local radio station aired a live roundtable. The host, a black woman in her 40s named Simone Traylor, opened with a simple, devastating question. Why does it still take a title, a connection, a last name to earn basic respect? The phone lines lit up instantly. Back at the 3rd District Precinct, Officer Kessler had been pulled from active duty. He sat in a private room across from Inspector Rachel Donnelly voice recorder, between them his badge and sidearm sealed in a clear plastic evidence bag. "Walk us through what made you initiate the stop?" she asked, voice even. Kessler shifted in his seat. The vehicle matched a description he offered flatly. "What description?" she asked again, tone calm but piercing. Kessler opened his mouth and stopped. He had nothing. No call-in. No bolo, no confirmed lookout, just an assumption. And now the same system he had trusted to cover his tracks was pulling him apart. Back at Camilla Monroe's home, she was visited by an old friend, Reverend Josiah Dean, a lifelong confidant and respected civil rights leader. He stepped into her living room like he had hundreds of times before, holding a small potted lily in both hands. For strength, he said simply, placing it gently into hers. Camilla gave him a soft smile. "You know I don't believe in symbolism." "But you do believe in roots," Josiah replied, smiling back. "And this one's got plenty." They sat together side by side in quiet understanding, looking out the front window at the peaceful line of homes that belied the fire burning through the city's conscience. "What are you going to do next?" he asked, gently. Camilla sipped her tea. "Let Everett do what he was raised to do. And you." She looked at him with a calm fierceness. "I'm going to watch the city find out what it means when the wrong woman gets targeted." Josiah nodded slowly. "I've seen that story before." Camilla's voice dropped just above a whisper. "Not like this," she said. "Not when a generation is watching." Meanwhile, Everett Monroe made his move. He stood at a podium inside the Harold Washington Cultural Center, flanked by community leaders and elected officials. In the front row, Camilla Monroe, dressed in a navy coat and pearl earrings, sat with her chin high and her eyes steady. Everett took a breath and began. "There's no easy way to say this," he said, voice calm but resonant. "Last night, my mother, Camilla Monroe, was pulled over without cause. She was profiled. She was questioned. She was disrespected." He paused. "And she handled it with more grace than that situation ever deserved." The room went silent, the kind of silence that holds its breath. "But this isn't just about my mother." Everett continued, stepping forward slightly. "It's about your mother, your aunt, Your grandmother. Every black woman who's ever had to calculate safety before speaking, who's ever had to shrink herself just to get home alive. He took another breath. Today we're launching a citywide audit of discretionary traffic stops beginning with Southside districts. We are implementing mandatory bias and de-escalation training for every precinct, and we're forming a civilian oversight board with real authority, not a rubber stamp. Applause erupted, not polite, not performative, but real, deep, needed. Everett didn't smile, not yet. He looked directly into the cameras, his voice like steel wrapped in velvet. And to the officers who believe power is a posture, not a responsibility, this city is watching. And we will not blink. That evening, Camilla received a letter through her mail slot. It was unsigned. I was the girl across the street. I watched what happened. For the first time, I saw someone stand without shouting. Thank you. Camilla folded the note carefully, tucked it into the pages of her Bible, and whispered to herself almost like a prayer, still working. In the days that followed, change didn't erupt. It rippled, quietly but relentlessly. More testimonies surfaced. A former teacher, a delivery driver, a nurse, all describing similar encounters with Officer Wade Kessler. He had a pattern, and now he had a spotlight. Camilla didn't go on TV. She didn't flood interviews. But when she spoke, people listened, because sometimes power doesn't wear a badge. It walks in grace. It knows its worth. And it waits not in fury but in purpose as the reckoning draws closer. The silence didn't end with a shout. It ended with a name. Camilla Monroe. It echoed through the city council chambers like a bell, loud and clear, steady and undeniable. Inside, shoulder to shoulder, the room went still as Camilla stepped to the microphone. She didn't look like a protester. She didn't carry signs. She didn't raise her voice. But what she carried in posture, legacy, and poise weighed more than any slogan ever could. She adjusted the mic only once, then began. I am not here today to ask for justice. I am here to remind you what it looks like. No one dared interrupt. I raised 3 children in this city. I buried a husband here. I paid taxes. I attended school board meetings, church fish fries, and every marital debate since 1989. And in all that time, I've known one truth that never changes. A black woman's dignity is always questioned before it is ever defended. She paused. Let it land. Until now. Across the room, cameras clicked. Pens froze. Even Councilman Peter Langley, who never missed a chance to yawn during public comment, sat upright. I didn't ask to be a symbol, she continued, but I refuse to be a footnote. Outside City Hall, a crowd had formed, not shouting, not protesting, but listening, through live streams, loudspeakers, screens held in trembling hands, grandmothers held toddlers. Teens stood with signs resting on skateboards. Barbers, teachers, deacons, poets, they all leaned in. One sign read, "Power doesn't always speak loud. Sometimes it just won't move." And that day, Camilla Monroe wasn't moving. Back inside, her testimony shifted. It wasn't personal anymore. I'm not here because of one officer, she said. I'm here because of the system that told him it was okay, the training that skipped over humanity, the protocols that forgot how to read the room or the people in it. She looked each council member in the eye. You've had report after report, committee after committee, but no mandatory review for discretionary stops, no tracking of officer complaints filed by women of color, no mechanism for real-time accountability. She leaned forward slightly. I've done the homework. Have you, Hushfell? One councilwoman nodded slowly. Another looked away guilty. That night, her speech went viral. Clips flooded the internet, but the most shared post wasn't a soundbite. It was one image, Camilla Monroe standing at the podium, head high, shoulders still. The caption, she didn't need a microphone. She was the message. 2.3 million likes in 48 hours. Celebrities shared it. Activists reposted it. but the most powerful responses were from everyday people. She reminds me of my grandma. Same eyes, same strength. This story broke me and built me again. We need to teach her name in civics class. Meanwhile, Everett Monroe was no longer just the state attorney. He was now publicly and undeniably the son of that woman. And that title, it carried more weight than any election win ever had. Calls poured in from networks, from D.C. A U.S. senator asked if he'd testify before Congress on racial profiling. But Everett didn't return the call. He was in his mother's kitchen, helping her slice sweet potatoes. "They want you to speak next week," he said. Camilla didn't look up. "Let them want. You're a national name now." "I was always Camilla," she said simply. "Now they're just paying attention." He smiled small, real, but then his voice softened. "You changed everything, Mom." She paused mid-slice, then looked at him. "Not yet, but I opened the door. Now it's your job to make sure it doesn't close." The next morning, CPD released a statement. Short, stark, strategic. Officer Wade Kessler has been placed on unpaid leave pending a full investigation. A third-party review board has been assigned. Effective immediately, a citywide audit on discretionary stops will begin. It sounded like accountability, but to Camilla Monroe and to the city, it felt more like survival mode. That same day, Wade Kessler was spotted entering a law office downtown. His expression wasn't angry. It wasn't even defensive. It was confused. Like a man who still didn't understand how a quiet black widow had become more powerful than his badge, because he never saw her. Not as a citizen, not as a mother, not as Camilla Monroe. And that, in the end, was the root of it all. Later that evening at a South Side library, a special community forum was held. Its title, "What Now?" Hundreds packed the room. Teens with burning questions, elders with memories, mothers with fury in their hearts and grief in their throats. Camilla sat quietly in the front row, just listening. And then, a young girl no older than 16 stood up. Her voice trembled, but her words didn't. "What do we do when they still don't see us?" Camilla rose, not to lecture, not to scold, but to answer. "You stop waiting to be seen," she said simply. "You build the room yourself." The room didn't erupt. It didn't need to. The applause that followed was the kind that shifts walls, grounded, earned, lasting. That night, as the streetlights flickered and the chill settled into Chicago's bones, Camilla took her usual walk through the park. No cameras, no crowd, just her thoughts and something heavier than memory momentum. She passed a group of teenagers near a bench. One of them stood. "Miss Monroe," he said, voice low but clear. "We're with you." She smiled, not politely, fully, warmly, like a grandmother seeing the future and liking what she sees. "Good," she replied. "You're the ones I was doing it for." Then she walked on, not away, but forward. Because when silence ends, it doesn't need noise. It just needs truth. And Camilla Monroe had spoken it, without permission, without apology, and with the kind of power they never saw coming. There are moments in life when history doesn't feel like a headline. It feels like breath. And on that quiet Sunday morning in Chicago's South Side, Camilla Monroe breathed deeply. The steps of City Hall were empty now, the microphones packed away, the crowd dispersed. But the impact of that fog-covered night, the night she was handcuffed for simply driving while Black was still moving, still building, and most importantly, still working. 2 weeks after her testimony, the city's Civilian Review Board was restructured. For the first time, Black women made up over half of its voting members. Camilla was offered a seat. She declined. "Let someone younger take it," she said. "I'll be watching from the front row." But instead, she did something bolder. She founded the Camilla Monroe Foundation, not a nonprofit built on pity or charity, but on empowerment. It had no high-rise office, no fancy slogan, just one mission: to remind our communities that dignity is not negotiable and legacy is not a privilege, it's a responsibility. The first Project A legal literacy boot camp in the basement of a Southside church for seniors and teens. Volunteers showed up. Pro bono lawyers offered their time. Local businesses donated supplies. By the second month, they had to move to a larger space. By the third month, they were on NPR. By the fourth, a mural went up in Bronzeville. It showed Camilla Monroe not as a victim, but as a lighthouse. One afternoon, during a quiet lunch break at the foundation, a young woman knocked on the door. She held a notebook in her trembling hands. "Miss Monroe," she asked. Camilla turned. "Yes, dear, I'm writing my college essay about you." Camilla blinked, surprised. "Why me?" The girl hesitated. "Because the day you spoke at that hearing, I realized I wasn't invisible. My mom cried watching it. My little brother started asking questions. And I decided to apply to Howard." Camilla didn't cry, but she smiled the kind of smile that only comes when hope gets confirmed. She reached across the desk. "Then let's write it together," she said. Meanwhile, Wade Kessler had quietly resigned. No press conference, no cameras. Just a line buried in the city's official records. He was later spotted applying for private security work out of state. What followed him wasn't Camilla's vengeance. It was his own decisions. Because she never sought revenge, she sought reckoning. And reckoning, when done right, leaves room for growth, but not excuses. Everett Monroe, now a respected voice in state policy, continued to push for legislative reform. One of his proposals, nicknamed Camilla's Law, passed unanimously in the state Senate. It mandated regular body cam audits, real-time stop-and-search transparency, a three-strike accountability clause for officers flagged in multiple civil rights complaints. At the signing ceremony, Everett spoke only one sentence. "This isn't for the mother I love. This is for the system that thought she was disposable." And the neighborhood Camilla called home, it changed too. The park where her arrest took place, now called Grant Grove. A bronze bench sat beneath an elm tree with a plaque that read, "She stood with grace." We stand because she did. Children now played in that space unaware of what once happened there. And maybe that was the point. Not to bury the pain, but to plant something better in its place. Years from now, Camilla Monroe won't just be remembered in court records or council minutes. She'll be remembered in the confidence of black grandmothers at traffic stops, in the boldness of daughters who refuse to lower their gaze, in the policies rewritten because one woman chose to say no more. She never asked for the moment to come. But when it did, she showed up for it. And in doing so, she gave the rest of us permission to show up too. The quiet force that changed everything. Camilla Monroe didn't wake up that morning trying to change a city. All she wanted was to drive home after honoring her late husband's memory, to return to her quiet dignity, her life of service, strength, and grace. But when those lights flashed behind her, what began as a routine drive became a catalyst for justice. This wasn't just about one officer. It was about how racism operates in silence, in posture, in the assumption that some people are less worthy of respect. But it became something more. It became a story of what happens when that silence is broken, not with rage, but with purpose. She didn't yell. She didn't beg. She stood. And in doing so, she reminded us all, power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a black widow in a Sunday coat, calmly demanding to be seen. So what can we learn from Camilla Monroe's journey? Silence isn't always peace. Sometimes it's the mask injustice wears until someone tears it off. Courage doesn't need a podium. It can begin in a courtroom, on a sidewalk, at a dinner table, or behind the wheel. Legacy isn't measured in titles. It's measured by the change we leave behind. You don't have to be famous to be powerful. You don't have to be in office to lead. You just have to show up for your truth, your people, your dignity. If this story moved you, stirred something in your chest, don't let it stop here. Like this video. Share it with someone who still believes in justice. Subscribe for more stories that matter. Because this channel isn't just about content, it's about connection. It's about honoring the voices that refuse to stay quiet. What part of Camilla's story stayed with you the most, and where in the world are you tuning in from? We want to hear your voice. Let's build this community together. Because real change starts with listening, and it continues with stories like these.